But the truth is, we are not diligent in doing what God requires of us. There are things that God will always do for us, but there are things that God will never do for us, and He is asked to do them. He has given us the principles to guide our health.
There is a growing interest in mental health of late. The medical world is experiencing a surge in mental health cases, and severe ones, pathological, while also the religious world is facing a surge in demonic possessions, and churches are all centered around this career of exorcism. But could there be a synthesis between these two? Could the Bible meet face to face with science and explain the cause of such and many other mental health problems? This and so much more in today's episode of The Microscope. I am Benjamin Habasa, and this is The Microscope, a program where we take a deeper and closer look at biblical events and characters, and in the end realize that these are not mere stories. Welcome, dear viewer, to another episode of The Microscope. Today is quite an interesting one, where we take even a closer look at the subject of mental health, and we go a bit deeper into even the more harder questions, and we come even the crux of the matter to some things happening in this age and time. Once again, we're with Dr. MWEBESE, where we shall be having a perspective combining both the science of the generation and the Bible, and getting somewhat of a synthesis on how these two things come together. In fact, it has been noted that the two fields, religion and science, especially concerning mental health, they kind of mock each other. Religion sees science as a skeptic, as an infidel. You don't believe demons can possess. And then science laughs. Invisible things entering people's brains. What exactly is that? But it would be interesting to notice that the Bible actually combines both, and both, if we could follow the Bible well, it could show us how these two things come together in one.
Welcome, viewers, once again to our episode as we discuss mental health. Yeah, this is a very important topic that you have brought. And that challenge that you have talked about, we often see it when we're in the mental ward units. Yeah, these laughs are always there because almost 99.8%, if I might say, of mental health patients that come around, they have passed via a preacher.
Wow. Either a preacher of Bible religion, or a preacher of African tradition.
Sure. And so either they are chasing out a demon. In all contexts, they are chasing out a demon. And when things fail, they come to the hospital.
Finally to the hospital. I saw one medical request form sent to one of the regional referral hospitals in the country.
Sure.
And the clinical note said, rule out evil spirit or epilepsy. And I don't know what happened in the hospital, whether they ruled out an evil spirit.
I do believe the receiving doctor or whichever it was, that would have been a right moment.
Sure, it must have been. And in fact, even it comes to, let me say, to a worse degree, that in these days, demon chasing has become quite a popular enterprise. If you want to start a religious organization, a church or something, make sure that you are promising the public power over demons. You can chase demons, and who come to you also get that power. Sure. In fact, demons are one of the chief, demon chasing is one of the chief commodities that religion promises to the public.
Sure.
So, today we find out. Let's start with a young man, well known by Bible readers and the Bible non-readers alike, by the names of Saul. Saul is introduced to us at first by Samuel when the people have craved and asked for a king. He's the tallest by a shoulder, but than all Israelites. And when he comes, he first shows a few signs of being self-centered and conceited and egotistical. To the extent that when he wins this terrible fight against the Philistines, he commands and says, okay, seems we have won. In fact, from a victory that was achieved by not him, but Jonathan. But he says, either way, I command this day, no man will touch food or drink until I have finished avenging myself on my enemies. Come on. The enemies of God and the nation, they're not your enemies. And how are you coming in? So he's a man that is so self-centered by the time we see him. And towards the end of his life, there's something else we see about him. The Bible starts telling us that he's being troubled by a demon. Now, to be sincere, ever since I was young, I have always been troubled by Saul's demon. A demon which comes and is chased away by music. I mean, that makes demon chasing so easy, which means we can give musicians gigs. The demon comes, come and play for a little harp or an acoustic guitar, and it goes. But it seems the Bible here has always tried to show us something beyond about both Saul's demon and all demons in general. Now, to begin with, what is the extent to which God allows Satan? What are Satan's powers in regard to the human? How much access does he have? And how much does man have to play in Satan dealing with them, their minds and their body and everything?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Talking about that, there is, let me just first start with the music bit of it. In all, let me say, demonic kind of rites, they're usually accompanied with music of a certain sort. And it can either come in chantings, in kind of words that they babble out, and a number of forms. And I'm glad that we shall have this platform to be able to understand the gist of that. And now when we do come to the question that you have asked, how far does Satan come to us? I think when we go to the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26.
Okay.
And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful. Verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness.
Okay.
I will first stop there for a moment. When Adam was created, the state of mind he had was as that of Adam, of God. In other words, he had that choice to make. He was holy. his attributes, his appetites, his passions were
in line with those
with that of God. And so how does now Satan come to infiltrate such a wonderful, brain that has been created by God and such a mind? So it all goes back to now Genesis chapter 3. And we have this discussion. And
serpent and the woman.
And the serpent and the woman. And it is through this chapter that we come to understand, without communication with the devil cannot infiltrate your mind.
Oh, that's so spot on.
If there is a communication between you and the devil will take possession of you.
In other words, Satan has no access unless permitted.
Unless permitted.
Wow. I find these words in the Review and Herald, May 19th, 1891. The writer prophetically says, Satan cannot read our thoughts, but he can see our actions, hear our words, and from his long knowledge of the human family, he can shape his temptations, take advantage of our weak points of character. And how often do we let him into the secret of how he may obtain victory over us? Communication.
Yeah.
By communication with each other and with his other instrumentalities and agents. The avenues of the human soul and mind are opened by none other than the human himself.
Yeah. And the power that Satan has, when they're making job adverts, they usually say they want this year's experience. You should have worked in a department or in a given setting for this and these years. What they want is actually they want years of experience. And Satan, over about 6,000 years, is into the business of studying character. And so to every man, there is a defect because of the carnal nature we took upon when Adam fell. So in that nature that we are in, we have spots of weaknesses through which the grace of God comes to help us to reach to the stature of the man Jesus Christ. And so these defects are what the devil will use to mount on us pressure into communicating with him. And so the quote brings it out. He cannot read our thoughts, but he watches.
Yes.
He takes note. He listens to what we are saying. And through that, he composes a temptation.
Wow. So if he cannot read our thoughts, how much more attack and take possession and possess? Like reading the mind would be a lot easier than actually possessing and using the mind. And so which makes me suspect even from the onset that Satan's access is as limited as possible, unless by man's special permission.
In our culture, we have this setting when, let's say on TV, you are watching news and they say he has been caught stealing. And usually the statement is, the devil
deceived him.
Deceived him.
And then he denied him.
And then he denied him.
Like
so,
so
you will look at, you will see that this situation, unless you give door open for the enemy, he cannot do much to you. And the greatest example is in the wilderness of temptation with Jesus Christ. He finds the door firm to enter the mind of Jesus.
No wonder Jesus can stand and say the prince of this world comes.
I think to that, he made, because he doesn't know what is going on through the mind of Christ. So what should I bring? Should I bring bread? Should I bring wealth? Should I? And so he brings all these, which he knows to the human being,
these are tough.
They have been failures.
Yes.
He has an experience of these years of tempting man with these grand things, and man has succumbed.
He knows that on food, if he didn't stand a chance.
Yeah.
So Starts with that.
And I think it brings into a better perspective, knowing that probably he was shocked when he saw the first lamb cut, blood shedding, and Jesus is pointing to Adam and saying, the Son of Man will come to die like that. Probably he was shocked because he couldn't understand the plan of redemption that was in the mind of God. And so in the wilderness, Satan, I do believe he was shocked again to see that all his trickery couldn't work on the Son of God. And so it points to us, actually when you read the New Testament, it has a number of, for example, 1 Peter chapter 1 and then verse 13.
Okay, 1 Peter 1 and verse 13, where the Bible says,
yes,
wherefore, guard up the loins of your mind.
yes,
Be sober, and hope to the end for your grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ.
God.
Guard your loins.
God.
In contemporary English, that is tie the belts.
Tie-
Tie the belts of your mind.
Tie the belts of your mind. And so there's something important about the mind. Yeah, so the devil can listen to whatever we are saying. He can look at the actions, he can look at the attitudes that we are in, but he is not able. And I think that is a treasure that we have.
Sure.
That I'm able to talk to my God in a sacred chamber with him.
Wow. Without speaking in tongues, without confusing the devil by language.
No, I don't need that. But I'm able to talk. And that's why they say, do not cease praying. And whether it is in the bustles of the towns, whether it is in all noisy places, nothing can limit a prayer to ascend. You do not need to speak out loud. And
for the mind is defensed by a bulwark which only God has access through, and this man. Now, here is one special avenue that this man of ours opened into his mind that led to his demon possession that we hear about. Ellen White tells us in this book, Patriarchs and Prophets, page 615, paragraph 3, about the man Saul. She says, Saul opened his heart to the spirit of jealousy by which his soul was poisoned. Notwithstanding the lessons which he had received from the prophet Samuel, instructing him that God would accomplish whatever he chose, and that none could hinder it, the king made it evident that he had no true knowledge of the plans or the power of God. The monarch of Israel was opposing his will to the will of the Infinite One. Let me skip one sentence and I go to the next. He allowed his impulses to control his judgment until he was plunged into a fury of passion. He had paroxysms of rage when he was ready to take the life of any who dared to oppose his will. And more says, from this frenzy, he would pass into a state of despondency and self-contempt, and remorse would take possession of his soul. So, dear brother, this is the summary of Saul's demon possession. Rage and bridled. Passion, like being self-willed. Like what he wants is what he wants, without any guard over it. This led him to despondency and despair. In fact, I can say he entered a clinical state of depression. And his depression, when he kicked God out of his mind, the demon came and sat.
Just read the Ecclesiastes chapter 10 verse 1.
Ecclesiastes 10 verse 1. The Bible says to me,
Yes.
Dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savour. And so doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honour.
Yeah, it is quite an interesting verse. As you are making your perfume and a fly
falls in.
The Bible says dead flies. So it dies and then it causes the ointment to send forth a stinking savour.
So those are the small dead flies of the character.
So you have this perfume that, wow, it is a good one. But as the fly dies, the laws of nature, it will decompose. Unless that perfume has chemicals that will fix the tissues that they won't decompose. But other than that, it is going to decompose. And guess what happens? There is a change.
Oh.
And so, prior to this, we have Saul reigning up to the reign of the kingdom, and he is ruling the kingdom. So he goes to challenge the Philistines, and then he kills these Philistines. But later a challenge comes.
Yes.
And guess what? But remember, before this, he had disobeyed God.
Sure.
From a battle, he comes and brings, the sacrifices, and he does the sacrifice himself. When Samuel comes, he says,
You have done foolishly.
You have done foolishly. And so before that elapses, here a challenge comes of Goliath. And the whole camp is frightened. You try to look at how these events are coming in, and the whole camp is frightened.
I like something about Saul, in that I have been doing a study on Saul. I find one of the commonest answers that he would always receive from his soldiers was, do what you want. Like, it seems they had got tired of advising him, or got tired of expecting him to obey God. So when he would say this and this, they would say, do what you want.
Because even if we tell you, you may do something else. And so now King David comes in. Sorry, before he's not yet king, but God has already selected him as the next king. And so he comes and challenges Goliath, and he kills him. And Saul remembers, hey, we have a battle to win here. Chases after, and they kill all these other people, the Philistines. As they march home, guess what? Music flares up in the air. Oh, Saul has killed thousands.
And David is slain his 10,000.
He could not believe what his ears have heard. And that was the opening of the gate to the enemy. The moment he knew that he had already disobeyed God, there is a challenger who has already been anointed, even young as he is. Even he has done he already knows that God has blessed this man, and he is going to be the king.
And he knows the cause of God selecting another man more than him is in his own doing.
Weakness.
What a contrast to the life of Jonathan.
Sure.
Who sees that God has selected someone different from my father, which means by default I won't be the next king. And he's like, powerful, go on.
Come.
Come on, let's be friends.
And so Saul opens. I don't know how, at times it is hard to explain why he felt jealous. Probably, was it the rain? Probably, because even when he's talking to Jonathan and all these stories, he's saying, that man, don't you know that if he's not dead, you won't be king of this nation. And so
he's interesting also in that Saul features the characteristics of this generation even the more. Let me put it this way. Many places where you go, especially churches, where you find a lot of confessions and the public prayer requests, there is one I have particularly always found disturbing and distressing. There are many people who have made it an enterprise to pray for their enemies. In fact, there are people who have been convinced that they have enemies.
Sure.
You find a person, his prayer is done, God defeat my enemies. God let me prosper that my enemies may see it and be ashamed. But when you try to see behind the scenes, you find actually this person has no enemies as he supposes.
At times it is an imagination.
It's an imagination. And so Saul actually imagined more than was true about his enemies. We find it even far worse when we come to the book of 1 Samuel. In chapter 20. And when we come to Saul's table, we come to verse 20 to verse 30. In verse 30, the Bible says, and Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. We are talking about Saul's unbridled anger. and Jonathan had helped David to escape his devices. He said, then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said unto him, thou son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Let me pause there. Who is this perverse, rebellious woman? Whose wife is it?
The mother of Jonathan.
Who is Saul's own wife?
Sure.
So, thou son of a perverse, rebellious woman, don't I know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? Now, this is KJP language. If it would be brought into this modern day language, this is quite vulgar and obscene. But this is the king, when he has succumbed to his emotions, is not ashamed to burst on the royal dinner and call his son the son of a something something.
Yeah.
And when we come to verse 31, it says, for as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. Saul has declared unto himself that I'm going to let my anger and passions control and rule me.
That's why I try to share with you that verse in Ecclesiastes. That first fly, when it fell in and allowed jealousy to, I think it is the same parallel with Satan himself. He looks at Christ and he can't bear the thought that he's the right hand man of God.
So Satan himself actually had a demon in the beginning.
Could that be a demon?
Like the little dead fly in his character was able to expand and purify the rest of
his character. And so we are looking at, if you are to see, in most cases it is our own makings.
Exactly.
And now these makings that we have, these weaknesses that we have, that point comes in a life when it overwhelms all this. And when it overwhelms all this, a flow of events happens that at times we are not able to control over them.
The power to control our emotions and our souls is always at the beginning, before we let any dead fly enter. But the question may come from the viewer. If you are purporting that demon possession comes mostly as a result of our own choices, what about little children whom we see getting such issues at the beginning? About that and much more after the break.
Katonda awaddeyo obugagga bw'eggulu bwonna okutulokola ffe abantu. Yatuwa omwana we omu yekka, Yesu Kristo, eyakka wano ku nsi n'akola ebyamagero n'ebyewuunyisa bingi nnyo eri ffe abantu, ffe tusobole okulokolebwa. N'olw'ensonga eyo tuzzibwamu amaanyi olw'emikisa gye tufuna okuva eri Katonda. Okuwandiika ebipande nga tuwaayo olugero lwaffe olw'ebirungi Mukama Katonda by'atukoledde, nga tumujulira.
Njagala kukakasa nti tolwana nange.
Olwana ne Katonda wange. Program Julira Mukama wano ku 3ABN TV. Weeri okuwa omukisa okujulira Mukama Katonda byakukoledde eri abantu bategeere Katonda oyo akola obulamu bwaffe, okutandika n'essaawa emu ey'akawungeezi okuva ku ssaawa 2 buli Saturday. Nange omwanjuzi wo Dembe Habart wano ku 3ABN TV, obubaka obutajugumbwa.
Welcome back, our viewers. And at this point, we're going to an interesting concept. It is found in Matthew chapter 17. And this is after Christ's transfiguration. And he left the disciples behind, and they brought this gentleman to the disciples. And they are meant to pray for them. And when you look at this story, it reminds me of a mental health condition called epilepsy. In Uganda here, epilepsy, we tend to put it into the mental conditions.
There are even religious people disordered.
Into the mental health section because of the way it is, its nature, and the chronicity of following up and all that. So epilepsy is a disease that is characterized by a generalized, disruption in the firing of the impulses within the brain. And then usually you have unprovoked seizure. A seizure is that, dysregulated firing of impulses within the brain. They're unprovoked. A person is there and all of a sudden
before they start conversing.
That's converse. A converse, these are involuntary motions of the body. So you can have generalized convulsions. In other words, they involve the whole body. And we call them tonic and clonic. So you have stiffening and then relaxing. So in the result, you have a jerking movement. So we have others that are just focal. It may be just a blink and I keep staring at you. Or it may be just a motion moving of just one limb. And this is usually associated with other things prior and after those convulsions. Somebody may have abdominal irritations, you might have incontinence, you might feel nausea, you might feel you're no longer smelling well, you may have some episodes of hallucinations. And when somebody is out of the convulsion, the patient may be unconscious, urinary incontinence, they may spoil themselves. And so that's the setting. And now when you read this with a medical lens, it looks like we're dealing with epilepsy here.
All right. Okay.
Listen how it says. And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic. That is in verse 15, where they say he is a lunatic. That is the word they use, a lunatic. Actually, when you follow in some versions of the Bibles, they will tell you an epileptic.
Wow.
And so in this case, we are saying the word a lunatic, and so were vexed. For oftentimes he falleth into the fire, and oftentimes he falls into the water. When you read this, because something maybe I didn't talk about, when we receive patients with epilepsy, it is not uncommon that you will find wounds on them. Because this, as I said, maybe just to make it into simpler terms, an unprovoked seizure. Somebody is walking, all of a sudden falls down and starts to jerk. Somebody is sitting, all of a sudden falls down. Somebody is talking, all of a sudden it comes. In other words, nothing has provoked it. There is no trauma, there is no hypertension, there is nothing, there is no disease, but the patient convulses.
You were reading the King James Version.
Yeah.
The New KJV says, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers it severely. The NLT says,
yes,
New Living Translation, Lord, have mercy on my son, because he has seizures and suffers terribly. New International Version says,
sure.
Lord, have mercy. NIV. Lord, have mercy on my son. He said he has seizures and is suffering greatly. So just translations juggling along
So,
points as like direction.
so now what is interesting is in verse 18. Okay, maybe we can. So the parents come to Jesus and say, we have brought our son, but your disciples are not doing something about this patient.
Okay.
And in verse 18, and Jesus rebuked the devil. Have you heard that?
Okay. I'm seeing. He's rebuking
And
the
Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. So what was the devil there? Was the disease the devil,
or
was the devil causing the disease?
Now that brings us to the real gist of our discussion. Now, friend, as we have noted,
And in some versions they use demon.
A demon.
Sure.
Wow. As we have noted a little bit earlier, once again, there is no access the devil has to our minds and our body, except if access is granted to him by the person. As we are going to round back to this little boy, let's first see another older person who is a demoniac.
Sure.
And then it's going to give us even a greater idea. There is someone we find in the book of Luke, and chapter 4.
Sure.
And starting from verse 33. The Bible says, and in the synagogue there was a man which had a spirit of an unclean devil, and cried out with a loud voice, saying, let us alone. What have we to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth? Art thou come to destroy us? I know thee who thou art, the Holy One of God. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, hold thy peace, and come out of him. And when the devil had thrown him in the midst, he came out of him and hurt him not. Now this is a man who is known even publicly to be possessed by demons. Now I want us to note this commentary from Ellen White about this.
Sure.
This demoniac. She writes interesting things. Now this is from the book The Ministry of Healing, page 91 and the 4th paragraph. The cause of this man's affliction also was in his own life. He had been fascinated with the pleasures of sin and had thought to make life a grand carnival. Intemperance and frivolity perverted the noble attributes of his nature, and Satan took entire control of him. Remorse came too late, when he would have sacrificed wealth and pleasure to regain his lost manhood, and had become helpless in the grasp of the evil one. Remorse came too late, and though he would have sacrificed wealth and pleasure to regain his lost manhood, he had become helpless in the hands of the evil one. Satan had allured that young man with many charming presentations. He had cloaked vice with a flowery mantle, that the victim might clasp it to his breast. But when his object was once accomplished, and the wretched man was in his power, the fiend had become relentless in his cruelty and terrible in his fierce and angry visitation. So it is with those who succumb to evil. The fascinating pleasure of their early career ends in the darkness of despair or the madness of a lost and ruined soul. So this is a man who indulged in sin at an early stage in his career or at a young age. And as he grew old, the devil took more and more and more control until the man was officially demon-possessed. To the extent, when he sees Jesus and wants to cry out for help, the devil uses his voice and he speaks. Now, there may be many speculations concerning what this man had done and what was that fascination with evil that he had been fascinated with. But one school of thought I may say that I have made concerning this exposition was that this man's vice was sexual perversion. And it had so ruined and weakened his mind that the temple of God could no longer be inhabited by God, but Satan had taken control and was now using this man at his will. How do I circle back to children? Surely a young child cannot have done this. But we have made a verse that says, among the 10 commandments, that I, the Lord, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the parents So children's third and fourth
Generation.
generations. Is this pronunciation by God just an arbitrary pronunciation that is jealous, and when your father sins, he's going to come and punish you? Or this actually has a mechanism?
We live in a generation, I think, where science, we are moving towards a shift where almost everything is going to be blamed to genes.
Okay.
And anything that can't be explained properly
Genes, mutations,
is
somewhere.
genes. I think in the science world, it's like we want more of action. We're doing something. And something that looks so simple to be true is always disregarded as that can't be true. But in this verse, actually it is in Exodus chapter 20, and I think it is in the second commandment. That is in verse 4, and then as you go down. So God is trying to tell us that what a mother does,
Yes.
what a father does,
Yes.
they have a contributing continuum on the child's life.
Simple.
As simple
Clear.
as that.
Even if you deny
You might be a drunkard.
and curse.
Sure. You know, I've come to realize that, say, a father was a drunkard and he left drinking, but he delivered you in the process of drinking alcohol.
Yes.
It is more likely that you have a predisposition to take
Taking
alcohol.
alcohol. That's tough.
Because that character, in a way, it is transmitted to you. You see, it is transmitted to you. What the alcohol does to weaken the body. You see, let me first read this quote. It is in Mind Character, okay, it is in Counsels to Testimony Behaviors, page 13. That was in 1890. That was the writing. Or you can find it in Testimonies, volume 4, page 60.
Okay.
The relation which exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health of the physical system. If the mind is free and happy from a conscience of right doing and a sense of satisfaction in carrying happiness to others, it creates a cheerfulness that will, even if I don't proceed there, what I wanted was in those first portions.
Of the mind and the body.
So the mind and the body, they have an intimate relation. And so whatever is going through, if I'm a very depressed mother,
You may produce a moody baby.
you are going to produce a
I've heard of
baby.
something called fetal alcohol syndrome.
Sure.
An expecting mother drinking a few sips here and there.
Yeah.
And the child is born with a few characteristics here and there, including on the physical constitution.
Sure.
Like a short nasophilia.
Sure.
The child has some disorganized facial features. The child is slow in understanding, and in class they will skip coming last. And in other words, before even birth, the body's mind is already, the channel is already open to the devil and to possession and to be used. And when the child also grows with a low moral fiber, the child has low self-control, etc. We won't blame the child to a greater extent. The mother will surely bear the blame eternally for this child.
Well, we see, when it comes to sin, in most cases, we want to distance ourselves from, we are not part of this.
Yes.
Probably, God, you are bad. Why could you do such a thing on us? But the truth is, we are not diligent in doing what God requires of us. There are things that God will always do for us. But there are things that God will never do for us, and it is us to do them. He has given us the principles to guide our health. And it is only and only us who can do them for ourselves. And God will bless what we do.
Yes.
If we do not do them,
It's
then
still on us.
it is still on us. And so there are diseases that are transmitted from the mother, from the father, from both of them, because of what they are, because of how they have lived. and because of the quality of what they have given to their children. And so because of this, we have minds that are predisposed to getting certain mental challenges. A very interesting quote that I've read in Desire of Ages, you know, from Malachi to Matthew, there's a span of many years.
About 400?
About 400. And this is a time where there was no voice of a prophet heard. And guess what? Sin was accumulating all through. One quote I love about that, he said, at the time of the first advent, man had been degraded to a point that the bodies were habitations of demons.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, sin had degraded man to a point that we are demon possessed. And in this demon possession, as we have been studying through, it is not something to come and throw you down and you jerk around and you, but the whole nature,
it can be something as simple as being annoyed.
Yeah.
Like you are eternally annoyed.
In other words, the state of society was so wretched.
Wow.
Was so wretched that even the most learned spiritual leaders at the moment could not perceive the Son of Man in his simplicity.
Wow.
And so,
I think I have access to that quote.
Sure.
The Desire of Ages, page 36, paragraph 3. It says the deception of sin had reached its height. All the agencies for depraving the souls of men had been put in operation. The Son of God, looking upon the world, beheld suffering and misery. With pity, he saw how men had become victims of satanic cruelty. He looked with compassion upon those who were being corrupted, murdered, and lost. They had chosen a ruler who chained them to his car as captives. Bewildered and deceived, they were moving on in gloomy procession towards eternal ruin. Now this is, I think, the part which is a bit more terrible. To death, in which there is no hope of life, towards night, to which comes no morning. Satanic agencies were incorporated with men. The bodies of human beings, made for the dwelling place of God, had become the habitation of demons. In paragraph 3, the very stamp of demons was impressed upon the countenances of men. Human faces reflected the expression of the legions of evil with which they were possessed. Such was the prospect upon which the world's Redeemer looked. What a spectacle for infinite purity to behold.
So that is the state. And no wonder people will say, this is the devil.
Wow.
This is the devil. Well, because man has lost his dignity as an honorable creature. Satan has deprived him. The mind process, the character has been degraded.
That is more easier to tend towards evil than towards good. Now, talking about children, before I think I lose it, before I forget, we have seen children, yes, who are born that way. But we can say a parent can claim to be not responsible and say, perhaps, those days I had not even known Jesus. I have no control over that because that was really in my days of ignorance. But then there is even much more that happens in early childhood. With the parents as the faithful sentinels over these children, if they had taken their guardianship seriously, they would have prevented. There are some things I have found, interestingly, in a book called Solemn Appeal by Ellen White. Page 55 and paragraph 2. I found things which made my hair stand on edge. It says, still it is about the evil of that generation, the sexual evil. It says, mothers, you cannot be too careful in preventing your children from learning low habits. It is easier to guard them from evil than for them to eradicate it after it is learned. Neighbors may permit their children to come to your house, to spend the evening and the night with your children. Here is a trial and a choice for you. To run the risk of offending your neighbors by sending their children to their own home, gratify them and let them lodge with your children, and thus expose them to be instructed in that knowledge which would be a lifelong curse to them. It moves on. I think this is a common thing, sleepovers. Kids are sleeping over. And it is unimaginable how much kids learn from each other in these early formative years from their ungodly neighbors. She gives her own example and says, "To save my children from being corrupted, I have not allowed them to sleep in the same bed, nor in the same room with other boys, and have, as occasion has required when traveling, made a scanty bed upon the floor for them, rather than have them lodge with others. I have tried to keep them from associating with rough, rude boys, and have presented inducements before them to make their employment at home cheerful and happy." Now, here is page 57, the last bit. It says, "The young indulge to quite an extent in this vice before the age of puberty, without experiencing at that time to any very great degree the evil results upon their constitution. But at this critical period, while merging into manhood and womanhood, nature then makes them feel the previous violation of her laws." These early childhood years are so delicate and dangerous that parents better never take any chance. In this generation, what is the children's greatest entertainment?
Okay, there is a screen before you, but
Basically.
there is mostly immorality, sexual immorality.
Basically, because that
One day I happened to reach, I think I was moving across my room and I had some people watching TV. And there was a music program, so they were interviewing this man. And they asked, "So what is the target of the music you play?"
okay.
The man boldly said, "This is for teens." In other words, all this music, whether love or whatever, the company or the industry is targeting teens.
Oh.
And you saw, it's not surprising of the society we have. It's not, because through those years of formation of the brain, of maturing of the brain, of strengthening character, this is when it's corrupted.
So indeed, a thorough understanding of the association between spiritual things, the mind, and the body would save us from a lot of stress and a lot of misunderstanding. In fact, so many people, when there is such infirmity in the family, they always either blame, yes, we say genes, which is quite true, but also they blame witchcraft, of course, and then they also blame germs. Now, that's so interesting. People come to blame bacteria for a deranged mind, but in this, I believe it wouldn't do anyone good to live without hope.
Yeah, maybe just a little one. All true science comes from God, and true science doesn't contradict the Bible.
Sure.
And so we do know angels fell from heaven and they are levels to And what we have known and understood is that a possession of a demon is that you have opened the gates for your character to be ruined by the enemy. And when it comes there, you are unable to control yourself or whatever happens.
Okay.
And in that state, we are thinking of the demon possession. In medicine, we do believe in disease, and mental diseases are real. We have mental diseases which need intervention. Any person that has a mental illness, you need to seek care. Other than that, you might lose some people who may be vulnerable. So it strikes a balance. Remember the previous episode, when the mental health crisis overtakes you, you might have
It may be beyond reversal.
And when that comes in, then joy tells us the cause is attained, and then the wrong habits removed, and then the correct habits instituted, and the body helps to regain back health. And so you need help when there is mental health.
So as the cure is, so is the prevention. It is a call to everyone to introspect inside their life. Where is the wrong habit? Which is most likely the cause of an upcoming illness if it hasn't come. And after knowing it, let there be a call to a revival and reformation of the habits that characterize each of our lives. And that is today's microscope. God bless you.
you.